Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and a brand new very side series that I'm calling Encyclopedia Esoterica. And this is your Christmas gift from me to you, to the community this year. Because I have dumped some Konami M2 arcade discs and I've talked at length comprehensively about the hardware. But I have gotten so many new original revisions on discs that have never been dumped before. What I am doing this holiday season is I am dumping my entire original disc Konami M2 collection for free for the community. There will be a link below. It is the culmination of absolutely everything I have so far collected for the arcade boards on the 3DO M2 hardware. I am still looking for different variant discs, so if you don't see it in the archive.org link and you own it, let me know. I will buy it off you and dump it for free for everybody. But it is taking me so long to collect all this that I just want to give it away this holiday season. I've taught you guys how to hex edit the real-time clock chips and the EEPROM chips so you can turn these disk images into any board you want, or you can restore an original board with the correct revision because not all of them exist online up until this point. I've also shown you guys how to fix 3DO M2 hardware, and I've shown you how to play it and capture it as well into your computer, so there should be nothing stopping you from trying to find the hardware and restoring it based on all the information I have given you, because it really isn't that hard. And hopefully soon you'll be playing arcade games on the 3DO FC35. Can't spoil it, it's being worked on. Might not work, we'll have to wait and see. But this is my Christmas gift to you. I'm always advocating for preservation and dumping of original rare items that aren't available anymore and how to fix them, like that real-time clock battery. So Merry Christmas. This video has videos on all 5 of the arcade games so you can get hyped. These files will work in MAME if you turn them into CHDs. Have a Merry Christmas. Hope you like the dump. Always dump things. It's the best. See you guys next time. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our new side series, Retro Revamp Rewind, where I take a look at 5 of the original games I covered on my channel back in 2018. Before we get too far involved, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We have a new Patreon as well if you feel so inclined. What we're taking a look at today is Evil Knight or Hell Knight for the Konami M2, and it's one of the original 5 games I launched my channel on, because when I showed this capture, it was the first time the game had been shown online from a direct arcade capture. There was a few videos of someone pointing a camera at an arcade cabinet, and I'm friends with that guy, but it was really fun to be able to get the first high-definition capture off the board and into a computer and onto YouTube. But what is Evil Knight or Hell Knight? Basically, it's a House of the Dead clone. Although they came out in very similar time frames, so it's hard to say if Konami was working on this after seeing the House of the Dead, or if it was kind of worked on near around the same time, because they share a lot of similarities, but pretty much every zombie light gun shooting game shares a lot of similarities. But the basic premise is, you're in this house, you're trying to find Liv, and everything is trying to kill you, which is the basis of every light gun game ever. Something's trying to kill you and you need to destroy it. What I love about this game so much is the horror aesthetic, the environment, all the character designs, and just how destructive they are. You can shoot chunks out of torsos, you can take heads off of characters, limbs off of them. There's a lot of love and attention paid to this game, including some of these little cutscenes. Now granted, it's a Japanese game from the 90s, so the story and the voice acting are obviously going to be abysmal, but that is the charm of those games from the era. Even things like the original Resident Evil, which had clearly a much larger budget than a Konami arcade game, still has terrible story, still has terrible voice acting, but it is charming in that way. And I love that you just took the top half of that woman's head off with the shot. So much destructibility in this game and so much interactability really push it to being a great experience. And I will say that as far as all the Konami M2 games, I think I play this one the most, just because it has so many different branching paths and variables in it that you can enjoy. I think this gets more play than any of my other games, maybe outside of Tobe Polystars. And I love the boss designs as well. You have this giant snake that just knocked you through a floor and took out the roof. And as you defeat him, and you will see him again, this other enemy comes through and just blows up a chunk of the snake. And as you kill him, he splits in half and exposes his spine. All of the art style, all of the sound effects, all of the music in this game are absolutely outstanding, and it just builds a really nice world for you to enjoy. And I would say that Konami did a great job with all 5 of the M2 arcade games. And I love these little vignettes here. You have these 2 zombies that I swear are wearing skeleton pajamas, and they're eating meat off a dining room table while crawling around. So they just went the extra mile in making this game feel really unique with those paintings on the wall there that I just shot. everything feels cohesive, and while, like I said, the story is hokey and the voice acting is terrible, playing this game is just a ton of fun. If you enjoy light gun shooters, this is a game I highly recommend because it is extremely rare. You're never going to find an arcade cabinet for this on arcade floors anymore. So if you do see a cabinet for sale, or if you encounter one in an arcade, definitely buy it or throw some quarters in it, because your odds of seeing another one again are basically almost zero. And I do appreciate the bosses here as well. Clearly this is Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or at least inspired by it, and the game does take a lot of different inspirations from classic horror movies, and that's kind of fun as they weave it in through the story, because you kind of have a familiarity with some of the character designs or bosses before you've actually played the game. And again, I love the voice acting. It is just so bad that it's good, but that's just traditional 90s Japanese voice acting. It's always bad. But what's unique about the game is that there are branching paths that are hidden. You'll see I just shot a 3D doorknob off that door, and most of the doors don't have doorknobs, but if you see a doorknob and you shoot it, you're able to access hidden areas to get different keys that will allow you to get different endings or different paths through the game. So as far as replayability is concerned, compared to some other light gun games, there's some decent replayability here. Now, it is an arcade game and you're only going to be able to play it so many times before you've seen absolutely everything, but trying to get further into the game without dying or trying to get a higher score than your last score is a lot of fun, and I do appreciate that. And I will say, as far as collecting arcade light gun PCBs for home use, this is one of the easier ones you can deal with because the light gun just needs an RGB and sync signal. There are no LED sensors, kind of like a Wiimote around the screen, which is something Sega used for the House of the Dead 2 and on, and other arcade manufacturers use. So this is one of the easier games to set up at home, and I do have videos on my On a Technicality playlist as to how to play these games on a PVM or CRT. So it is something that you can do in your house if you have an old style television. If you guys ever need help doing that, please do let me know, because I have helped people find these arcade boards. I've helped them repair them, and I've helped them get them running in their own houses, because I love all 5 of the Konami M2 games so much. It's my goal to try to keep them alive, both hardware and in your minds, so that more people may actually be interested in playing them. Because I will say this game has something for everybody. And the art style to me is great. The character designs are awesome with all the different destructible limbs that you can blow off. It's got a great soundtrack, and it's pretty long as far as an arcade light gun game is concerned, so there's going to be a lot of playability there for you. And if you have more than one gun, or if you have the shotgun, you can play with friends, because the guns have a fun mechanic in them. If you point them straight up at the sky, there's a mercury switch that'll complete a circuit, and you can get a charge shot, which I just used right there. So there is more than one way to play this game. What I'm going to do now is just let you guys listen to a little bit of the sound effects and the soundtrack, because they are quite good, and I'll be back in about a minute. We'll close out our revisited video on Evil Knight, or Hell Knight, for the Konami M2. And it's called Hell Knight because in Asia there was already an Evil Knight, so they had to change the name, if you were wondering. I'll be back in just a second.
This place stinks. I feel nauseated.
Where are we?
Somebody's still here.
I think this place is some kind of ruin.
I know.
The fun thing about this game is that it has some hillbilly zombies in it, and I love that it seems like every arcade light gun game featuring zombies has to have one in a flannel shirt. House of the Dead 2 has it, Evil Knight has it. It just seems to be that if you're a zombie, your style is going to be to wear a flannel shirt. But now the game kind of changes things up when we have this Egyptian level, or at least it seems like it to me, because that seems like a mummy who's throwing bandages at you, and you get a couple different sort of graphical effects that kind of give you an Egyptian flair to it. But basically the story, and trust me, I'm not ruining much, is that some scientists found something underground underneath this house, and it unlocked an ancient evil. And depending on what keys you have and what routes you take, you'll see that we now go underground. And I do love the branching paths in this game, because you can play it and have completely different experiences. After about stage 3, the game really opens up and sends you in different directions. But do I recommend you buy this game? I do. I love it. If you like light gun shooters, you're going to have a ton of fun with this. I would say that this is definitely on the same level as the original House of the Dead. If you've played it before, you tell me what you think, but I like it as much, and I definitely would never get rid of it from my collection. Now, if you are looking to get an original PCB, you're looking around like $400 to $500 for that, and then the guns are going to cost you about $100 each, whether or not they're working. I got a good deal on mine and I had to fix them, but it's not going to be the cheapest thing in the world to purchase if you so want to. But as far as Evil Knight's concerned, it's a huge thumbs up for me, not only because it runs on the 3DO M2 hardware, but because it's just a really fun horror light gun shooting game, and I love light gun arcade games, especially horror genre ones, so for me it is the perfect type of game. But short of that, thanks so much for watching. Do me a huge favor, go down below and hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell. We really appreciate your guys' support. But we will be back with another retro revamp revisit in the future, but we got videos on Sunday and Tuesday as well. Short of that, hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and a brand new side series we're calling Retro Revamp Rewind. What I want to do with this series is revisit some of the earliest videos on my channel, specifically the 5 Konami M2 games, because I talked about them a lot, but I've listened to the voiceovers and I don't love them, and since these are such important games that are so rare and people know so little about, I kind of wanted to loop back around and do a 2-year update on these sort of things. But before we get too far involved, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We have a Patreon now as well if you're so interested, and that link is below. But to start out, we're taking a look at Tobe Polystars, which is a shmup released by Konami in 1997, and I would say that this is definitely my favorite game on the Konami M2, which is just a derivative of the 3DO M2 console design that was obviously cancelled back in 1997 and we never got as a home system. And this was the game that kicked off my collecting for M2, because I had the system pre-ordered back in 1995 or 1996, and I was super looking forward to it, and I had seen previews in magazines of Tobe Polystars with rumors that it was going to be ported to the home console, and that clearly never happened. So when I wanted to find an M2 to play, I wanted to find a Polystars board. And what ended up happening actually was I saw 2 different boards for sale at the same time. I put bids on both of them because I wanted to make sure I won one, and I accidentally won both, so I own 2 of these games. So my first 2 M2 games are actually the exact same thing. But considering it is my favorite game on the Konami M2 platform, having a backup PCB isn't the worst thing in the world. But as far as why I love this game so much, outside of the absolutely colorful and charming art details, which I will talk about in a little bit, is the fact that it does something slightly different than most vertical shmups, in the fact that as you move your ship forward, it gets smaller, and there are some foreground and background elements that you have to deal with, because enemies aren't always just going to be attacking you from the front. Sometimes they're going to come up behind you and you have to deal with that. But I absolutely love all the character designs in this game. The first boss, it looks like to be a flying pig with a speaker on his snout, shooting these sonic rainbow attacks at you. And all the bullet patterns, while fair, are challenging. I'm playing this on medium, but if you kick it up to very hard, getting a 1-credit continue would be a very difficult thing. And that's why I love shmups in general in this game so much, is because of all 5 Konami M2 games based on the 3DO M2 hardware, this one definitely has the most replayability for your money. And I do love these little segments between stages. You get these extra animated, like CGI renders of what's going on. I will say, if you're looking to collect this game, it can be quite expensive. Currently, there's one for sale on Topps Japan, if it's still for sale once this video goes live, and they're looking for about $850 American dollars plus shipping for that. So this is getting very close to a $1,000 game. But you can convert other Konami M2 boards to run it with a burnt CDR and an ISO file, so you don't have to get an original Polystars board if you want to play this game. It can be converted. And I've got a ton of videos on how to do that if you just look at my On a Technicality playlist, or I will link it below. But if you ever have any questions about that, please ask. I'm happy to get more people to experience this game, because that's just how much I really enjoy it. Now, interestingly enough, this actually didn't start life as a 3DO M2 or Konami M2 game. If you go into the file structure, there's a big and little endian. It's just kind of how the byte length works on a file. And this is the exact opposite of what the Konami and 3DO M2 look for. And in the software, it switches bytes around so that this actually runs. I'm not sure what platform this was originally intended to run on, but it's not a Konami or 3DO M2 game natively. It was ported over, and that's the only instance of that port happening for the system. So I'm not really sure what the intent was for Polystars, but it's just a little interesting history of the game. But like I said, the art style is what gets me coming back to this game over and over again. It has that kind of cute 'em up vibe like Parodius does. Konami was famous for that. And I love this gigantic robot squid that we have to fight with all these tentacles coming out and these pink missiles. And pretty much every opponent has eyes on them. They kind of look like googly eyes in a way. But the basic story is you are in a world of polygons, and your main enemy wants to take all the texture work out of your world and turn it into a flat shaded polygon universe. And basically they just kind of took some of the technology behind how they make games and put an entire story together with it. And it's just a fun little nice touch. And this game, like I said, it just has charm coming out the wazoo. It's colorful, the soundtrack is great. Everything about this is a great presentation that just makes you want to play it over and over again, because now we are shooting these box dinosaurs on the ground. And speaking of on the ground, you have two attacks. You have your straight shot forward, and then you have a bomb that will travel along the ground, and you have two control styles for that. You can have the bomb on the same button as shoot, or you can have the bomb on a separate button. But you do need to worry about ground-based enemies as well as the enemies that are flying towards you, and in later stages it gets very complicated to handle all the different things you have to deal with at once. But the soundtrack to this game is absolutely stellar. I could listen to it without playing the game, and I actually use the soundtrack for a lot of my technical videos underneath me talking, because that's just how much I like it. What I want to do now is just give you guys a little time to listen to it. That way you can hear all the sound effects and the music, and I'll be back in about a minute. We'll close out the video on a revisit of Tobe Polystars. But enjoy! And now we're on to the next boss, which you can clearly tell is the Tyrannosaurus Rex made out of cardboard boxes, and he is wearing boxing gloves. And that's what I think I love about this game so much, and what drew me to it back in the 90s when I saw previews in magazines, is that I've always been partial to these very vibrant, cute, colorful games. It's an art style that I really love. And if you're into that as well and you like shmups, you're going to have a ton of fun with this game. If you're not into that art style, maybe it's not for you, because like I said, it runs about $900 to buy a PCB, so it's definitely something you need to be sure that you really want to play before you purchase. But it seems like the developers at Konami had a ton of fun in making this game, and between the colorful art style, the fun character models, the quirkiness, the really upbeat soundtrack, and everything, the sum of its parts makes a game that feels unique and wholly special to me. And that's what I love about it so much, and that's why it's the first game I sought out, because to me it has everything that I'm looking for in a shmup. And as far as the weapons are concerned, you do have a good diversity, and being able to upgrade your firing pattern is going to be super important, because when I was fighting the Tyrannosaurus Rex cardboard box boss, I had a homing attack, and if you can keep that homing attack from stage 1, getting a 1 credit continue becomes infinitely easier. Now the 3-way spread shot makes things relatively easy, but when you're trying to attack some of the enemies that are coming from the side of the screen, having that homing shot is going to be your best friend, because it's going to make the game, I don't want to say easier, but it's going to definitely change your play style up, including the fact that a lot of the stages feel completely different. Now that we're onto this stage here, we've had this large ship following us for about a minute, and we need to destroy it before we can move on further into the stage. So the game also has a lot of diversity in each individual stage. I mean, granted, it's always going to be a shmup and your main goal stays the same, but how you play each stage does have a ton of diversity to it. And now that T-Rex is back, but as opposed to being a cardboard box, he's now a piloted mech with wings. And the game is just so charming, I can't help but love it. But that is Tobe Polystars, and that's our revisit on it to get some better commentary, since it is such an awesome and important game. But if you do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It takes a lot of time and energy to make each one of these videos, and we're going to have 4 more Retro Rewind revisits coming up soon on the other 4 Konami M2 games, because they are so rare and they are so unique. I kind of want to let them have a little bit more of the limelight. See you next time. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our new side series, Retro Revamp Rewind, where I take a look at some of the original games I covered when I started this channel over 2 years ago, and today we're taking a look at Tryst for the Konami M2. Before we get too far involved, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. There's also a link to our Patreon if you feel so inclined. But the reason I'm revisiting these games is because, one, they are so important because they're extremely rare and they run on the 3DO M2 hardware, which was canceled as a console. But secondarily, my commentary on them when I first started isn't up to what I'd like it to be, and since I love these games so much and really want to get other people interested in them, I kind of want to just evangelize them a little bit more. But obviously, if you can't tell already, Tryst is a one-on-one 3D fighting game, and it is the only fighting game on the Konami M2 platform. It had one shmup, 2 light gun games, 1 soccer game, and 1 fighting game. And this is probably the one that people ask the most questions about because people really love rare and obscure 3D fighters. And Tryst is definitely a good example of that. It is a very fun game. Now, I'm not going to say it's in the same tier as something like Virtua Fighter 3 or Tekken. It's definitely a tier lower than that because Konami was never the best at making 3D fighting games, but it is still a lot of fun to play, and it has a decently competent fighting mechanic system that has depth enough where you can get good at the game and really enjoy it. I will say it's much better as a 2-player game because the computer AI in this is either infinitely easy or seems to be able to block absolutely every attack. But how it basically works is it's a 3-button fighting game. You have a punch, you have a kick, and you have a guard. And depending on how you use that guard in conjunction with attacks, you can either use it for offensive grapples, or if you hold up or hold down with that guard when somebody is attacking you, you can have a reversal grapple to be able to deal with that forward-facing attack. So it's a pretty simple system having only 3 buttons, and I'm definitely more familiar with SNK's 4-button setup from the Neo Geo, but it has enough depth you can really learn characters and get really good at the game. Now, I will say your mileage will vary based on whether or not you have friends around you that like and enjoy playing fighting games. Because it's a 2-player game, you can get some really great matches in, especially if you have another person that's learned a few characters. But if you're just playing against the AI computer, getting to the end of the game takes about 5 minutes, and while there are 11 characters in total you can select from, including time-based unlocks of 4 other characters, you're not going to get a ton of gameplay out of this if you're playing alone. And it isn't the cheapest game, it's not the most expensive either. You can get examples of this for $400 to $500, but you need to decide if you really want to spend that much if you don't have other people to play with. But it is one of the rarest 3D fighting games, only rivaled by Konami's other 3D fighting game, Fighting Fujitsu, which I've been looking for a copy of and been unable to find. But as far as graphically, it looks really nice. I wish that the backgrounds are 3D, not 2D, but I understand maybe they couldn't get this game running at 60 frames a second had they chosen that, but I think the backgrounds could have a little bit more love to them. And weirdly enough, there is a special fighting mode. If you press the start button during gameplay, you can switch to a first-person mode and to a 45-degree angle third-person mode. It's fun to look at, but it is basically impossible to win a match. It's not easy, and I think I know why Konami decided to go with this camera angle, but it's a fun little aside as far as the game's concerned. But the reason I wanted to revisit this is it's just a very unique fighting game, and it is extremely rare. This never came to the US, and I think there's only 2 arcades in Japan that actually have them on the floor right now, so actually finding a cabinet to play is going to be extremely difficult. But if you're a collector of arcade PCBs, you can find this game. It's not going to be easy, but it does come up for sale now and again, and if you are looking for a new and unique fighting game experience to add to your collection, I definitely do recommend it because it is quite fun. And now we're playing as Pastel from the Twin B series, and she is one of the timed unlocked fighters. And I do like that you get 4 additional hidden characters, although if you watch the ending FMV, the credits, there's another 8 characters shown that never made it into the game. Some of the characters from Castlevania were supposed to be involved in this as well. So it's kind of an interesting example of a game that's still really good and unique and rare, but clearly they cut so much out of this to get it into arcades in 1998 that I would have loved to have seen what the game would have been like had they gotten all of them in. But you do get some fun things like this Eileen versus Eileen mirror match. You get a brand new background that's almost impossible to access in the main game. Whatever conditions there are to face Eileen in this stage are quite convoluted, and I've only ever seen it once, maybe twice, in a normal playthrough without tricking it into showing up during a mirror match. What I'll let you do now is just watch a little bit of the game and hear the soundtrack, as it is quite good, and I'll come back in about a minute and we'll close out Tryst, and I'll tell you if I think you should buy it. But enjoy! Now the question is, should you pick this game up if you're a fan of 3D fighters? And that's kind of a complex answer to give. If you don't already have things like Tekken or Virtual Fighter in your arcade PCB collection and your arcade PCB collector, I would probably start with those games first, because they're definitely a level above what Battle Tryst has on offer. But if you're a huge 3D fighting game fan like I am, and you already have some of those PCBs in your collection, this would definitely be an awesome game to look for and pick up, because it is a very competent fighter. It's like a B-tier game as far as 3D fighters are concerned, but there's a lot of fun to be had, and like I said earlier, in a two-player versus match, you can really get into this game, learn it, love it, and have a lot of fun with it. And it's not the most expensive game you're going to find. Some of the more common fighters with a little bit more complex hardware go for about the same price, fully working, as a Battle Tryst board does as well. Although granted, if you are looking for this, you're going to have to be patient because they don't always come up for sale. But I think the game is really fun. When I first played it, I wasn't quite sure about it. My first commentary back when I was doing this 2.5 years ago almost, it didn't sound that good when I was talking, and I don't think I really articulated my point well, because at that point in time I thought the game was fine, but I wasn't super enthusiastic about it. But as I've gotten a chance to play it more over the last couple of years with friends, alone, and doing different things with it, it's definitely grown on me to the point where I would never get rid of this PCB from my collection, not just because I want a complete Konami M2 set, because I'd be really sad if I couldn't pick up this game and play it now and again. So you need to kind of make that decision for yourself if it's something you would enjoy playing. It does emulate on MAME, but it is quite poor, so really an original PCB is the way you're going to want to go. But you need to decide for yourself if this is something you'd be interested in playing, because while I really enjoy it, I do say it is not as good as some of the other fighting games on the market, so you need to decide what is right for you. But what I do love so much about the game is that it has all these great FMV sequences. When you win the game, you get this anime sequence that just looks and feels great. They put a lot of love into this game, and you could clearly tell it was destined to be ported to the 3DO M2 console, because Konami's deal with the 3DO company and Panasonic was to have all these games ready to port over when the console launched. Obviously that was canceled and they never got it, but it is fun to be able to play 5 real games for the 3DO M2. But short of that, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you could do us a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It takes a lot of time and energy to make each one of these episodes. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below as well. I love chatting with you guys. Well, we will be back in a couple of weeks with our third M2 revisit video. Short of that, we really appreciate you guys for watching. We'll be back on Sunday and Tuesday with more episodes, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our new side series, Retro Revamp Rewind, where we take a look at 5 of the original games I started my channel talking about, and we cover them again because my original commentary and thoughts weren't exactly up to par for how good these games really are and how unique and rare they are. Before we get too far involved, we can do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We also have a new Patreon as well, the link's below if you feel so inclined. But today we're taking a look at Total Vice, and this is one of the games that was previewed in magazines back in 1996 and 1997 as a prospective game to come to the 3DO M2 home console, and there's only 5 screenshots of this game online up until the point that I found a board and I captured it for YouTube. There was never any gameplay videos that you could see, so for the longest time I was curious what this game really was. I knew it was kind of like a gangster-themed street gang shooter, but other than that I really had never seen anything about it until I was able to find a PCB. A friend of mine in Australia found one from one of his collector friends and shipped it all the way to Chicago for me to be able to capture and play this. And I now have 5 different Total Vice boards with different revisions, and honestly I can't see a single difference between any of them, but I went from having 0 to having way too many in my closet. But as far as the game's concerned, it's another awesome game on the Konami M2 platform. We've already shown Evil Knight, and that's an awesome horror-themed light gun game, but now we have a completely different kind of like Dirty Harry street shooting game that I really enjoy because all 5 of the games on the Konami M2, the soundtrack is exceptional on all of them, and the soundtrack on this has that kind of like really fast rock music that you would expect from a shooter like this. And this was released in 1997 versus Evil Knight being in 98, and it runs on a earlier revision BIOS, which doesn't really change much, but it is one of the earliest games for the Konami M2 platform, so I would say visually it's slightly less impressive than Evil Knight is, but it's still really awesome to look at, and had this come home in 96, 97, this would have blown away anything on the PlayStation 1 or the Nintendo 64. And I just love all the different character designs here. I swear this is kind of like a take on Rucker Howard, but you come into this really dramatic camera sweep and you have this dude up here with his leather vest tattoo and a giant chain gun that he just holds in his hands like it's no big deal, like it weighs nothing. And that's what I love about this game, is that it feels like Lethal Enforcers, except a version of it that's in full 3D, because Lethal Enforcers came out in 92 and the sequel came out in 95, and then you had a third game in the early 2000s. So it seems like Total Vice being a 1997 game maybe meant that it was going to be Lethal Enforcers 3, but no matter what it's called, it is an awesome game. And I love that he just throws his chain gun directly at you and magically comes up with another, like he has an infinite chain gun supply behind that bus. And his death sequence is just perfect and elaborate. He shoots up into the air for the longest time. I don't know if it's supposed to be comedic, but it definitely makes me laugh. And I kind of like that about the game, is it definitely has a sense of humor and a charm to it that makes you want to play it over and over again. And I would say that if you're into light gun shooting games, this is definitely one that you would want to pick up. Obviously, if you watch my channel whatsoever, you'll know that arcade and home light gun games are one of my favorite genres, because when I was growing up and going to arcades, every time I saw a new light gun cabinet, I absolutely had to play it. And interestingly enough, this game was actually shown in an Eddie Murphy movie as well. But otherwise, I never actually saw this game on arcade floors in the 90s. I don't think it got a ton of distribution. It kind of came and went like a lot of the Konami M2 games. But now that we're at the wharf here, basically we're trying to break up a drug deal in progress, and the boss of the level kind of has a Scarface vibe to it, a little bit of Miami Vice going on there as well. And I like that each level has its own kind of theme. We went through the biker street gang level, now we're going to the wharf and killing all the guys wearing, Hawaiian shirts, and the guy at the end, the boss, is going to be wearing a full white suit. And in the last level, we're kind of doing like a Nakatomi Tower Die Hard sort of race to the top of the tower to beat the villain. The game just has a lot going on. The music is great, the sound effects are good. The one downside is that the guns originally had speakers in them, so when you shot, you'd get a sound effect close to your ear. Now you can't get that to mix into the capture music, and I actually don't even have the guns that have those sound effects in them. And don't shoot the cops, you'll lose a credit, they love doing that to you. So the guns are actually harder to find than the arcade PCBs themselves. You can grab this game for around $200 if you find it. It is rare, but the rarity is not going to really translate to the expense. But finding the actual guns that go with the game are probably harder to get than the game itself. And like I said, it works perfectly fine with a Hap gun or with the Evil Night guns, but if you're missing the speaker, you don't get the gunshot sound effect. To me, it doesn't bother me whatsoever, because you still get the sound effects of ricochets and you still get the characters yelling when they die. But if you're looking for the complete experience, you are going to need to find those guns. Or you could wire up a speaker into the pins on the PCB and just have it sitting next to you. It's been a project I've wanted to do and I just haven't yet. What I'm going to do now is just let you listen to a little bit of the soundtrack and sound effects, because they're absolutely great. And I'll be back in just a minute and we'll close out Total Vice, but it's an awesome game. Enjoy listening, and I'll talk to you in a second.
Thanks for ruining our deal. I'm gonna butcher you.
And bootleg Scarface is going to fall down and electrocute himself on a grate, which I have no idea why it's electrified, but that's neither here nor there. And moving on to the final level in the game, I would say it's my favorite because it's basically a race to the top, and the boss battle set piece is one of my favorite things to play in the game itself. But if you are an arcade light gun game collector, I can't recommend this game enough. Not just because it runs on a rare platform that was never released as a console, only in arcades, but it just has a ton of things going on for it. Each level is diverse and unique, the soundtrack is awesome, the graphics for their time are really nice to look at, and it's really easy to set up because these guns just use an RGB and sync signal. There's no extra sensors involved, so getting this up and running on a super gun isn't very difficult. I will say that there is a standard and a medium resolution version of this game, and if you don't have a medium resolution monitor, you're going to want to convert it to a standard def, and I have some videos in my playlist to show you how to convert that over, but it looks great in standard definition as well. but it's just a really fun game, and I wish they made more arcade games like this. I loved the 90s light gun shooters. They were violent, they were fun to play, they had a lot of action to them, and they had a little bit of humor as well, kind of like 90s action movies. This kind of feels like Die Hard to me, where you're racing to the top of the tower and the boss is even going to make a Christmas joke. And I definitely feel like this was inspired by some films like Scarface, like Die Hard. And I love that you have the guy that falls directly in the toilet and just shakes his hands. They put a lot of little touches in this game, and unfortunately there aren't any branching paths, so it is very linear, but replaying it for high score to see how far you can get on one credit is really awesome. And I just love this final boss battle with a helicopter flying through the different high-rise buildings downtown. It's just a fun way to end the game. But short of that, that is total vice. Like I said, if you're into these type of games, try to find one. It might take you some months to actually find a PCB that is available, but don't pay any more than like $250 to $300 for it, because it doesn't go for more than that. But this is the last video we had to show on Retro Revamp Rewind. We hope you enjoyed it, because it was a lot of fun to talk about the games that started off the channel. But don't worry, we'll have videos on Sunday and Tuesday as well, and we'll have some brand new stuff coming up on the channel. But if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. I love chatting with you guys. But short of that, if you could do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It takes a lot of time and energy to make each one of these videos, and this capture 2 years ago was the first time Total Vice had ever been seen in motion on YouTube. And he is blowing up, and that is all that's going to happen. See you next time. Bye-bye. Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica, our new side series, Retro Revamp Rewind, where I take a look at 5 of the original 3DO M2 games I showed when I first started my channel over 2 years ago. Today we're taking a look at Heat of 1198, otherwise known as the World Soccer Championship. Before we get too far involved, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We have a new Patreon as well if you're so inclined, and that link is below. But I would say that Heat of 1198, while a perfectly competent soccer game, is 100% my least favorite of the 5 games that Konami released on the 3DO M2 hardware. And I think that's just down to the fact that I don't really care that much about sports games. Soccer especially, I never played it growing up, it's not a huge thing in the US. So for me, while this game is fun, it's not something that I have to play time and time again. But I will say the big advantage of this game is that you can find it for extremely cheaply if you can find it. And it's a really strange thing with this game is that this is the hardest board to find. It took me the longest time to find an original Heat of 1198, but I found that out of Japan, and I paid $49 US for it. It cost me double to get it shipped to the US versus what I paid for it, and I have not seen another one for sale since. So while it's very difficult to find it, if you can and it's cheap, it's an awesome game to pick up because it is a fun arcade sports game, and it seems like Konami tried to hit pretty much all the genres on the Konami 3DO M2. You have 2 light gun games, you have a fighting game, you have a shmup, and you have a sports game. The only thing we really didn't get was a driving game, but the PCBs actually have additional areas where it looks like you could have put an analog steering control on there, so I think they must have had plans for it. And I do love all the commentary when they yell goal, although that crowd effect does not look good whatsoever. The waving flags look kind of nice and fluid, but the people sitting in the audience do not look great at all. And the interesting thing is, Konami released so many different soccer games in the 90s. There are soccer games for the PlayStation 1, for the Nintendo 64. Every console basically had a Konami soccer game, including some that were released in 1998. But this is a wholly original game. The only thing that I can see that was reused from one version to the M2 is some of the flag waving effects in the audience. But they made an entirely original M2 arcade game for soccer, and that's probably down to the fact that these games are all planned to be ported to the 3DO M2 console before it was canceled. And you definitely want to launch with a sports game, and soccer being such a huge worldwide phenomenon outside of my lack of interest in it, I could totally see why this game would get made from the ground up and then released in arcades, because you kind of had to have a sports game to start. And I don't know a ton about soccer, but I'm pretty sure you're not supposed to slide into the goal with the ball. I think they would have called a penalty on that. But the great thing about this game, outside of the fact that it is cheap, is that it runs on the Revision 2 BIOS, and it has the real-time clock security subboard, which means that you can convert this to play all the other Konami M2 arcade games. So if you can find a cheap Heat of 11, you can turn it into an Evil Knight, you can turn it into a Battle Tryst. If you change the BIOS, you can turn it into a Total Vice or a Tobe Polystars. So it's probably the cheapest board you can buy that'll end up being the most versatile board for you, because Battle Tryst and Evil Knight can be converted to play all 5 games as well, but you're going to pay in the $500 to $600 range for those. those. This game, if you can find it as cheap as I did, is going to cost you less than a brand new release for the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox One. Well, even cheaper now because they're $70 games. But your mileage with this game may vary. If you're a huge soccer fan, if you have friends that love playing sports games with you, in 2-player mode, this is a ton of fun. In 1-player mode, it's one of those things where the game is incredibly easy until it becomes exceedingly difficult. Once you get to the tournament rounds, you start losing almost immediately. Even if you turn the difficulty down to easy, I have never actually beaten this game, and I've owned it for over like 2 years now, and I've still yet to see the championship at the end. I'm not sure if it's even achievable or if they just had some coding errors and you can't really get to it. It's one of those things. I don't play it enough. Maybe if I kept checking it out and trying to get better at it, I'd be able to beat it. But do I recommend you pick this game up? Well, of course I do, because it is infinitely cheap and it runs on extremely rare hardware that was supposed to be a console to release to home audiences that was canceled at the last minute and only ended up in arcades. So from a rarity and fun standpoint, to the expense, this game is great to pick up. If you really like soccer, it's one of the cheapest soccer arcade games you can find, and if you just want to convert the board to do different things, it's also a great platform to be able to do that. But I mean, graphically, it's probably the weakest of the 5 M2 games. The models don't look great, the audience effects don't look great. I think it was just a quick game, but you do have a lot of different players on screen at once, so of course the polygon count for each model is going to have to be lowered just because they've been pushing a lot of stuff around. And that's the first time anyone scored on me. Cameroon finally got one in, but I ended up winning 6-1. What I'm going to let you do right after this game ends is I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of the soundtrack because it's fun for a soccer game, and the sound effects and the announcer, I'll do a really good job of articulating what a soccer game would feel like. And I will be back in just about a minute. We'll wrap up our video on Heat of 1198, also known as the World Soccer Championship over in Japan. But enjoy.
Goes in by himself. Shoot! A fine save! He aims. How will it go this time? Go, 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 go! Has enough strength. Good. Counter-attack. How does he handle this? Goes in by himself. Will he shoot? Nice marking. Goal!
From Italy versus Scotland.
This card is played by the first round of the tournament. Italy versus Scotland. Well, kick off. Which team will get the lead? Rejected. Yeah, to the left. Goes in by himself. Front of the goal. He's going all the way.
So interestingly enough, I can't find a single example of this game ever being released in America, but where it seems to have ended up is Mexico, because I know a couple of Mexican collectors that have these PCBs in their collection, and they've both told me that they found these games in arcades back in the 90s, and it definitely seems to have gotten a lot of distribution in Europe as well, because a couple of European collectors have said the same thing, and that makes sense because in the 90s, soccer really wasn't much of a thing in America. I mean, we have Major League Soccer now, and I don't know much about it, but it's definitely gotten more popular as the years have gone on, but it makes sense why this maybe never came to America. But as far as the game's concerned, if you love soccer, you might really like it. I think it's fine, it's fun to play with friends, but it's definitely not a sport that I enjoy that much, so it's not something that I get a lot of play out of. But as far as an opportunity to convert this into a different game, it's the cheapest PCB you can find, even if it is the hardest, and it's going to give you the most versatility. But I enjoy it. It's not my favorite thing, but to get a full set, you have to have all 5, and that's what I did. Short of that, really appreciate you guys watching. If you do us a huge favor, go down below and hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It definitely takes a lot of time and energy to make each one of these episodes, and we have finally gotten to the stage in the game where it has become incredibly hard, and I'm going to lose. And normally what I do is I lose once, try again, lose a second time, and I turn the game off. Because I've never actually seen the ending to this, and I don't think I ever will, because it's not something that I feel compelled to find out how it ends, because I know how it ends. You're going to get a trophy, and you are the champions. Short of that, we will have videos on Sunday and Tuesday as well, but if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I love chatting with you guys, but that is about it for Heat of 1198 or the World Soccer Championship. It's a perfectly fine game. If you like soccer, you might like it more, but I've lost, and I'm turning it off. Bye-bye.